Deities of Ruś. Translation of a fragment of a chapter Slavic Deities from Religion of Pagan Slavs by Stanisław Ułbańczyk. Deities of Ruś. Veals exhausts the list of deities who may have at least a tenuous claim to be considered common in Slavic mythology. All others' deities are known only from Pomerania or Ruś, and even the reality of some is poorly substantiated. For the most part, they cannot be considered deities of a higher order, but only demonic beings. The deities of Ruś include Estishebug, Hors, Makash, Siam, Argil, and Troyan. I will go through them briefly. Siam and Argil. In some manuscripts, Siam and Argil are combined into one name, Siamargil, so that we do not even know whether we are dealing with one or two beings. Both possibilities had their defenders, including Bruckner, who was an ardent supporter of duality. According to him, Argil has the same root as Rej, the old name for rye in Polish. In Rusian, rye is still called Ojejeri. In Polish it's called Jito, compare Ukrainian Jete. He would therefore be a field or grain idol. However, Bruckner himself acknowledges the possibility of an etymology linking Argil with the name of the Lithuanian demon of sour things, Ruguksis, and with the verb zhikech to vomit, tn. That is, Argil, according to Bruckner, is the god of sour things. In order to extend the power of the idol to at least Poland, Bruckner cites the Polish place names Argielsko and Argilu. However, these names prove nothing more than that the word Argil or Argil was once known in the Polish language. Everything else is just speculation. If only we knew anything more about this possible Argil of Ruś. Meanwhile, apart from a bare mention, and not even a completely certain one, we know nothing more. It was certainly not a god of a higher order, but some minor demon. The name Siam, written in the chronicles as Sim, is supposed to be related to the word Samia, family, which would make Siam the patron saint of the family. At least that is Bruckner's view. He would like to see him as a god of broader significance, in particular a Polish god, because there are numerous names such as Simeonowo and Simeonowis in our country, that is Poland. However, they only prove that the root Siam, which is lost today, once existed in the Polish language. It still exists in Rusian and below Rusian, where Syamya/Syamya means family, tn. However, some of these names, if not all, may come from the Christian Shimon/Simon. Therefore, it is certainly less of a mistake to reject Siam and Argil at least as Polish gods than to consider them Polish. Of course, it is more likely that they were deities of Ruś. Bruckner's etymologies are only one of many. Niederl lists 4 of them. There is, for example, a view, supported by certain arguments, that Siam and Argil are adaptations of the Old Testament gods Asima and Nergal or Urgil. In general, we know so little about the existence or non-existence of these gods in Ruś that etymological discussions should be considered entertainment for otherwise serious scholars. Bruckner himself said the following about his colleagues' etymological attempts. I deliberately refrain from quoting the most amusing etymological antics that have been performed on this pair of names. Surely many would express similar opinions about his etymologies. It speaks volumes that Niederl, a very cautious scholar who saves what he can from the Slavic Olympus, does not consider Siam and Argil to be Slavic names, but foreign, perhaps even invented. Hors. An equally dubious figure is Hors, whose name is also spelled differently, Hrzs, Harrows, Hers. He is mentioned among the gods of Vladimir, and then by the chronicles using Nestor as reference. It is not known what god he was if he is not fictional, as some conclude from a mention in the tale of Igor's campaign that he was the sun god. However, some mythologists, led by Bruckner, disagree. As might be expected, there is no consensus among etymologists. Only Bruckner derives the name from Slavic elements, from the root, which is said to be found in the word przecharsli, withered. He does not explain the connection between withering and God, but an analogy can be found in the name of the Polish household demon, Ubaz, also meaning something miserable. Other etymologists consider Hors to be a loanword from Greek, Iranian, or Turkic. Niederl lists 5 etymologies. In this case, quantity does not indicate quality. I mentioned the low value of the tale of Igor's campaign as a source of mythology in section 4, a not translated on this blog, tn. In Nestor's chronicle and writings based on it, Estishibug is mentioned without any further information. Indeed, the tale of Igor's campaign refers to the winds as the sons of Estishibug, which would imply that he himself was the god of wind, but this cannot be relied upon too much, as the tale had a rather vague idea of paganism, if it was not a forgery. Bruckner, a believer in the authenticity of the song, rejects its testimony in this case without the slightest scruple. There is, of course, no shortage of etymologies. Estishibug was most often associated with the root stry, an onomatopoeic word for the creaking of the wind, meaning that Estishibug would be the god of creaking, whistling, the personification of the roaring wind. Bruckner, however, accepts the root strib, known in Ukrainian meaning jumping, which would make Estishibug mean jumper. This etymology has gained few supporters among experts. In addition to these two, 3 other equally uncertain etymologies have been coined, so it is best to refrain from making any definitive judgments about this deity. Makash. The female deity Makash, mentioned in the Chronicle and other sources, appears to be exceptionally real. These historical records suggest that she had something to do with certain sexual offenses, such as masturbation, but this is unlikely, since according to today's folk beliefs, Makash, as a woman, visits houses during Lent and disturbs women who are spinning, supervises sheep and shears them herself. For her, strands of wool are placed next to the shears at night. If one were to take place names into account, Makash could be promoted to a pan-Slavic deity. How many names have the root Mak? But no one has seriously attempted this, and rightly so. An etymological derivation from the root Mak, as in Moksik to soak, is possible, but there is also a derivation from the Finnish name Maksa, Mox, which would make her originally Finnish demon, which is consistent with the existence of the belief in Makash only on the Slavic-Finnish border. While sober scholars admit their ignorance, some give free rein to their imagination, claiming that she was the protector of women in their work. She sought to promote shearing, later sheep shearing, flax cultivation, and spinning. Appropriate items were offered to her, such as strands of wool. The original meaning of her name has not been explained with certainty, but from the fact that outside Russia you can find traces of her in local names, for example in the Czech Republic, the hill Makashin near Przelexa, we learn about the importance of this goddess, and at the same time that she was offered sacrifices in the highlands on sheep pastures. As we can see, sometimes even philologists write poetry. From the name of the hill, the author of the quoted words conjured up a fantasy about a place of worship, and the news about the disturbance of women became the basis for the claim that she was the protector of women. Troyan. Troyan is undoubtedly of foreign origin. It is generally accepted that this refers to the Roman Emperor Trajan, whose conquests reached the borders of the Slavic world. As emperor, he was worshipped as a god, and statues of him were erected in the Balkans and Dacia, where the Slavs could encounter his cult and eventually adopt it as their own. It would not be surprising to assume that his images could have been a model and inspiration for the Slavs to imagine other native gods. Traces of the old cult exist in the Balkans, where a night demon with wax wings, influenced by the myth of Daedalus and Iker Rush, or a demon with goat ears, supposedly echoing the legend of King Midas, is called a Troyan. Bruckner, who generally follows the correct principle of explaining as much as possible without going beyond Slavic languages, rejects the Roman origin of the god Troyan, but cannot decide on anything else. It seems that he would most like to see in Troyan the Slavic root troj, as in Patrajny, triple, etc., especially since there was a name Troyan which was probably not inherited from the emperor. The cult of Troyan in Rush is, in fact, rather poorly documented. 3 sources mention it, unfortunately under suspicious circumstances. The first, the Word of the Holy Apostles from the 13th century, refers to it in these words. So that people would not fall into a great error, believing in many gods, in Paran and Hors, Dija and Troyan and many others, because they were ancient Indians, Paran in Greece, Hors in Rush, Troyan was emperor in Rome. Dija is Zeus' old Polish spelling. Dzius Tn, so equating Troyan with him, suggests that the writer of the monument considered him to be an ancient god, not a Slavic one, and that the writer had a vague idea of paganism in general. The message in Chodzeni Bogorodicy po Mekech, the walking of the Mother of God in torment, from the 12th century presents a better picture. But they forgot God and believed in the creation that God created for us to work, and they called it all gods, the sun and the moon, the earth and water, animals and reptiles. And they made Trojan whores, veals, and Pern gods. They believed in evil demons, and to this day they are enveloped in evil darkness. The content does not reveal who the author had in mind, but judging by Perun and others, it was probably the Slavs, in which case the cult of Trojan among the Slavs would become more realistic. The third mention in the tale of Igor's campaign is again very vague. The poet calls the distant pagan times the ages of Trojan, or attributes to the singer Bojan the ability to follow Trojan's trail across the fields to the mountains. In fact, only on the basis of the second of the sources discussed can we conclude, not without great doubt, that in the final era of paganism, a demonic being derived from the deified Emperor Trajan was known to some Slavs. This concludes our overview of the gods of Ruś. Apart from them, the sources mention a certain Periplut about whom little is known, or even, in a blatant violation of the truths attributed to the Slavs, refer to foreign gods such as Apollo, Aphrodite, Hecate, Baal, or Osiris. Similarly, in the West, all peoples were spoken of in this way, and Długosz also attributed the cult of Jupiter to the Poles, etc. These are cases of classical and Christian interpretation already known to us. Compare section 3rd above, not translated on this blog, TN. Furthermore, in later sources we encounter pseudo-deities such as Lada, Cupolo, Yarilo, Tur, Usled, etc. Their value is the same as that of Lada and others in Długosz.